How Sammy Davis Jr. ended segregation in Las Vegas with one simple demand that changed everything forever. It was March 15th, 1955, and Sammy Davis Jr. was about to make a decision that would revolutionize Las Vegas and cost him everything he had worked for. What happened that night at the Copper Room would either destroy his career or change America forever. Sammy was at the peak of his fame. The Will Mastin Trio, featuring Sammy Davis Jr., was selling out every major venue in the country. Frank Sinatra had just invited him to join what would become the legendary Rat Pack. The world was finally recognizing his incredible talent, but there was one problem that followed Sammy everywhere he went: the color of his skin. In 1955, Las Vegas was a glittering oasis in the desert for white America, but for black entertainers, it was a beautiful prison. They could perform on stage and make the crowds roar with applause, but the moment they stepped off that stage, they became invisible. Black performers couldn't eat in the restaurants, couldn't swim in the pools, couldn't even stay in the hotels where they headlined. They had to find lodging on the other side of town, in the segregated area locals called the West Side. Sammy had been living this contradiction for years. Night after night, he would dazzle audiences with his singing, dancing, and impressions, receiving standing ovations from crowds that wouldn't sit next to him at dinner. He would finish his set to thunderous applause, then quietly slip out the back door to drive across town to a boarding house where black performers were allowed to stay. But on this particular March evening, something inside Sammy Davis Jr. had reached its breaking point. The Sands Hotel had just offered Sammy the biggest contract of his career. 6 months headlining the Copper Room, the most prestigious venue in Las Vegas. It was worth more money than Sammy had ever dreamed of earning. Frank Sinatra himself had recommended Sammy for the gig, calling him the greatest entertainer alive. This was supposed to be Sammy's moment of triumph. Jack Entrater, the entertainment director at the Sands, was practically glowing as he laid out the contract terms. "Sammy, this is it," Entrater said, sliding the papers across his desk. "You'll be the highest paid black entertainer in Vegas history. We're talking about $15,000 a week for 24 weeks. That's more than most white headliners make." Sammy stared at the contract, but he wasn't thinking about the money. He was thinking about something that had happened the night before. After his show at the Flamingo, Sammy had been walking through the casino when he saw a young black couple being escorted out by security. They had tried to sit at one of the slot machines, but management had told them the casino was for hotel guests only. The couple explained that they were guests. They had driven all the way from Los Angeles to see Sammy perform and had booked a room. But the clerk at the front desk claimed there had been a mistake with their reservation. Sammy watched the whole thing happen and felt sick to his stomach. These people had paid their hard-earned money to see him perform, but they were being treated like criminals for trying to enjoy the same amenities as white guests. In that moment, Sammy realized he was part of a system that celebrated his talent while degrading his people. Now sitting in Jack Entrater's office with the biggest contract of his life in front of him, Sammy made a decision that would change everything. "Jack," Sammy said quietly, "I need to ask you something." "Sure, Sam. What's on your mind?" "If I sign this contract, will black customers be allowed in the Copper Room to see my shows?" Entrater looked uncomfortable. "Now, Sammy, you know how things work here. We can't change the whole system overnight. But your shows will sell out anyway. What does it matter?" "It matters because I'm tired of performing for people who think I'm good enough to entertain them, but not good enough to eat dinner with," Sammy replied, his voice getting stronger. "It matters because there are black families saving up their money to see me perform, and then getting humiliated when they try to enjoy their night out." Entrater shifted in his chair. "Sammy, be reasonable. The Sands has investors, board members, other performers to think about. We can't just change decades of policy because one entertainer asks us to. I'm not just any entertainer, Sammy said, standing up. You just told me I'm going to be your highest paid black headliner. If I'm worth that much money to you, then surely I'm worth listening to. Look, Sam, Entrata said, trying to sound paternal. I understand your feelings, but business is business. We've got white guests who expect certain standards. If we start mixing the audiences, we'll lose customers. You'll lose money too. Sammy picked up the contract and looked at it one more time. $15,000 a week. More money than his father had made in 10 years. Enough to secure his family's future forever. All he had to do was sign on the dotted line and continue being the best entertainer that Jim Crow laws would allow him to be. Jack, Sammy said, I've got a counteroffer for you. I'm listening. I'll take half the money, $7,000 a week, instead of 15. But every show I perform has to be integrated. Any black customer who buys a ticket gets treated exactly the same as any white customer. They can sit wherever they want, in the Copa room. They can eat at any restaurant in the hotel. They can use any facility they choose. No exceptions, no special rules, no separate seating areas. Entrata laughed nervously. Sammy, you can't be serious. You're talking about throwing away over $200,000 to make some kind of political statement. I'm not making a political statement, Sammy replied. I'm making a human statement. I'm saying that if people think I'm good enough to pay money to see, then people who look like me are good enough to be treated with dignity and respect. The other hotels will never go along with this. Entrata warned. You'll be blacklisted. Frank won't be able to help you. Your career could be over. Sammy walked to the window and looked out at the Vegas Strip. He could see the lights of all the major hotels, the Flamingo, the Desert Inn, the Riviera. Each one a temple to entertainment that welcomed his talent, but rejected his humanity. Jack, let me tell you something, Sammy said, turning back to face the entertainment director. I've been performing since I was 3 years old. I've tap danced until my feet bled. I've sung until my throat was raw. I've told jokes and done impressions until my face hurt from smiling. And you know why? Because I thought if I was just good enough, if I was just talented enough, people would forget about the color of my skin. Sammy's voice was rising now, filled with years of frustration and hope. But I've learned something, Jack. Talent without dignity is just a minstrel show. I won't be your dancing monkey anymore. Either I perform for everyone, or I don't perform at all. Entrata was quiet for a long moment. He understood the position Sammy was putting him in. The Sands had already advertised Sammy's upcoming engagement. Tickets were selling fast. Frank Sinatra was planning to make surprise appearances during the run. Canceling now would be a publicity nightmare. But integrating the Copa room, that was something no major Las Vegas hotel had ever done. It would set a precedent that could change the entire industry. It would anger important customers and powerful investors. It could ruin business relationships that had taken years to build. Sammy, Entrata said finally, what you're asking for, it's never been done before. Then let's be the first, Sammy replied. For the next 3 hours, Sammy and Entrata negotiated the most unusual contract in Las Vegas history. Sammy would take the reduced salary of $7,000 per week. In return, the Sands Hotel would become the first major casino in Las Vegas to integrate its showroom and facilities during Sammy's performances. The policy would be simple. Any customer, regardless of race, who purchased a ticket to see Sammy Davis Jr. would have full access to all hotel amenities. The hotel would not only allow integrated audiences, but would actively promote the shows to black customers through advertising in black newspapers and radio stations. As word spread through Las Vegas about what Sammy had negotiated, the reactions were explosive. Some white performers threatened to cancel their own shows rather than follow integrated acts. Several major investors called emergency meetings to discuss pulling their money out of the sands. Local newspapers ran editorials condemning the decision. But something else happened that surprised everyone. Sammy's shows sold out faster than any engagement in Copa Room history. Black families drove from California, Arizona, and Texas to experience what many called the first taste of freedom in Las Vegas. White customers, rather than staying away, seemed intrigued by the novelty and energy of the integrated audiences. Opening night was March 25, 1955. As Sammy walked into the Copa Room for the first time and saw black and white families sitting side by side, sharing the same tables, enjoying the same service, he felt something he had never experienced before in a Las Vegas showroom. He felt at home. The show was electric. Sammy performed with a joy and freedom that audiences had never seen before. He sang, he danced, he did impressions, but more than that, he celebrated. For the first time in his career, he was performing for everyone, and everyone was welcome to enjoy the full experience. Frank Sinatra, who was watching from the wings, later said it was the best performance he had ever seen Sammy give. It was like watching a man discover what it felt like to be completely free. Sinatra recalled, "Sammy wasn't just entertaining that night. He was liberating himself and everybody in that room." The success of Sammy's integrated shows sent shockwaves through Las Vegas. Within 6 months, 3 other major hotels had quietly begun allowing integrated audiences for their top black performers. Within 2 years, the practice had spread throughout the Strip. But the real change went beyond just audience integration. Sammy's contract had included a clause requiring that all black employees at the sands, from dealers to waitresses to janitors, receive the same pay and benefits as their white counterparts. Other hotels competing for black entertainers and customers began adopting similar policies. By 1960, what Sammy had started with one simple demand had fundamentally transformed Las Vegas. The city that had been a symbol of segregated entertainment became one of the first places in America where black performers could work, live, and play on equal terms with their white colleagues. The financial sacrifice Sammy made was enormous. Over the course of his career, his decision to demand integration cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars in reduced fees and cancelled bookings. Some venues never forgave him for forcing their hand. Some performers never forgave him for changing the rules of the game. But Sammy never regretted his decision. Years later, when asked about the contract that changed Las Vegas, he said, "I could have taken the money and kept my mouth shut. I could have been rich and miserable. Instead, I chose to be paid less and sleep better. Some things are worth more than money. Dignity is one of them." The ripple effects of Sammy's courage extended far beyond Las Vegas. His success in integrating the Copa Room inspired other black entertainers to make similar demands in other cities. The precedent he set became a model for the civil rights movement's later efforts to integrate public accommodations across America. In 1963, when Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech, he specifically mentioned the progress that had been made in Las Vegas, crediting entertainers like Sammy Davis Jr. for proving that integration was not only morally right, but financially successful. Today, there's a plaque in the Copa Room at the Sands, now the Venetian, that reads, "In honor of Sammy Davis Jr., who proved that talent without dignity is meaningless, and dignity without action is powerless. March 25, 1955. The night Las Vegas changed forever. But perhaps the most fitting tribute to Sammy's courage came from an unexpected source. In 1965, 10 years after he had first demanded integration, Sammy received a letter from a young woman named Dorothy Williams. She wrote, "Mr. Davis, you probably don't remember me, but I was one of the black customers in the Copper Room on your opening night in 1955. I was 22 years old, and it was my honeymoon. My husband and I had saved for 2 years to afford that trip to Las Vegas. When we walked into that showroom and sat at the same table as white customers, when the waiters served us with the same respect they showed everyone else, when you looked out at that integrated audience and smiled like you were seeing a miracle, that was the night I knew America could change. That was the night I knew I could raise my children in a world where they wouldn't have to accept being treated as less than human. Thank you for having the courage to demand what was right, even when it cost you everything." Sammy kept that letter for the rest of his life. When people asked him about his proudest moment as an entertainer, he wouldn't talk about his hit records or his sold-out shows or his awards. He would talk about March 25th, 1955, the night he looked out at an audience where everyone was welcome and realized that he had finally become the entertainer he was meant to be. The story of how Sammy Davis Jr. ended segregation in Las Vegas reminds us that real change happens when individuals have the courage to sacrifice personal gain for collective progress. It shows us that talent alone isn't enough. We must be willing to use our gifts to create a better world for everyone. Sammy could have taken the easy money and perpetuated a system that celebrated his abilities while degrading his humanity. Instead, he chose to risk everything for a principle that seemed impossible to achieve. His simple demand, that all people be treated with equal dignity, didn't just change Las Vegas, it changed America. If this story of courage and principle moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything. Have you ever had to choose between personal gain and doing what's right? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible stories about the entertainers who changed the world.